principled approach. So principles from Hebrew life, kingdom, commerce, and infrastructure. The central principle of Jewish economic philosophy is the divine origin of wealth. All wealth belongs to God, and the man is the one who manages it. In fact, man himself is a creator, which through decent work and innovation is strengthening, protecting, and improving the world. The economic philosophy of the Hebrews was simple. The society in which they lived was also a simple one. Economic problems were never studied separately. Economics, politics, ethics, and philosophy were interconnected, but religion and ethics were given greater importance. Economic life was controlled by priests. They gave importance to agriculture. The Hebrews had definite ideas on subjects such as interest, agriculture, property, and taxation. And so we should note that the law governed every aspect of Hebrew life. And I've put here, compare with the beginning of the church in Acts, all things common. So obviously we cannot directly draw lines from Hebrew life to now because a lot of things have changed. But if we take the principles that they live by, we can implement them. We often preach about the spiritual side of the kingdom of God, but we never really talk about the natural side. Now, the kingdom of Israel, naturally, the law governed every part of the social, economical, political, and religious. Every part of their life was governed by the law, and we can take from that principally, right? So, as we see here, economic problems were never studied separately, right? But somehow in church, we've gone super spiritual and we haven't done any natural. And so we have a lot of people in the kingdom who are spiritually good, but carnally just really silly. Don't know how to handle money, don't know how to create wealth, which is something we should be able to do. So principles from Hebrew life, kingdom, commerce, and infrastructure. Do for self. So commerce, sale or exchange of goods, generally on a large scale during biblical period. The Hebrews in Palestine had what is known as natural self-sufficing economy. That is, each household grew or made all the food, tools, and clothing it needed. A few articles of luxury or necessity, such as gold, silver, iron, salt, which could not be found on the Israelitish farms, were supplied by merchants who carried them around the country, and for that reason were known as soher, from the root meaning to wander. These merchants were almost exclusively from Canaanites, probably Philistines. Hence, when the good wife sells her wool, she disposes of it to the Canaanites in Proverbs 31:24. The Israelitish tribes were mainly settled on the uplands of Palestine, and therefore were not touched by the streams of commerce which flowed by the two great caravan routes along the coast, through the Tyre, Akko, and Gaza to Egypt, and from Saudi Arabia, through Petra on the east side of Jordan to Damascus. So the Hebrew people were self-sufficient. They used to grow and make all of the tools and the food they needed to survive. They wasn't that close to much of the trading routes, but the merchants that used to come through, they would buy and sell from them. So principles now from Proverbs 31. And I just want to go over this. We this is spoken of a lot about the virtuous woman, but look into the principles of commerce in the life of the Hebrew woman, right? So or the virtuous woman. It is very hard to find the perfect woman, but she is worth much more than jewels. Her husband depends on her. He will never be poor. She does good for her husband all her life. She never causes him trouble. She's always gathering wool and flax and gladly making things with her hands. She is like a ship from a faraway place. She brings food home from everywhere. She wakes very early in the morning. She cooks food for her family and gives the servants their share. She looks at land and buys it. She uses money she has earned and plants a vineyard. She works very hard. She is strong and able to do all her work. When she trades the things she has made, she always earns a profit, and she works until late at night. She makes her own thread and weaves her own cloth. She always gives to poor people and helps people that need it. She doesn't worry about her family when it snows. She has given them all good warm clothes. She makes sheets and spreads for the beds, and she wears clothes of fine linen. People respect her husband. He is one of the leaders of the land. She's a very good businesswoman. She makes clothes and belts and sells them to businessmen. She is praised and people respect her. She looks to the future with confidence. She speaks with wisdom. She teaches people to be loving and kind. She is never lazy. She takes care of things in her house. Her children say good things about her. Her husband brags about her and says, there are many good women, but you are the best. Grace and beauty can fool you, but a woman who respects the Lord should be praised. Give her the reward she deserves. Praise her in public for the things she has done. Now, this is a very resourceful woman. Look at how economically astute she is and how good she is at business. Now, often now in a very misogynistic age, now we've got it to the point where sometimes men just think women should just be at home cooking and cleaning. But this woman wasn't just cooking and cleaning. This woman was making business. This woman was creating wealth. This woman was buying and selling. And her husband was a leader. So this idea somehow that a woman should just be at home just doing housework, it's not biblical. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a woman keeping house, but keeping house was much more than that. According to this, she was quite economically astute, and she played a big part in the family business. She played a big part in money coming into the house, even though her husband would have taken care of her and would have been the main provider. She was also a financial provider. So moving on. So what do you do in captivity? So Jeremiah 29, thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, unto all that are carried away captives, whom I have caused to be carried away from Jerusalem unto Babylon. Build ye houses and dwell in them, and plant gardens and eat the fruit of them. Take ye wives and beget sons and daughters, and take wives for your sons, and give your daughters to husbands, that they may bear sons and daughters, that ye may be increased there and not diminished. And seek the peace of the city whither I have caused you to be carried away captives, and pray unto the Lord for it. For in the peace thereof shall ye have peace. So when Israel was being carried away captive to Babylon, God had some instructions. Now, if we look at us now in this Western society, you could almost say that we're in Babylon and we're in captivity, right? Because it's not godly people running the country. And as we can see, the laws and all of the edicts of the land are starting to become hostile to Christianity. And one of the things this Black Lives Matter movement, not the sentiment, but the movement is bringing in is a hostility to Christianity, because the whole transgender LGBT thing is going to bring a lot of heat on Christianity, because now people are going to say what we believe is hatred and hate speech, and the Bible is hate speech. It's coming, right? But look at the principles that God was saying to them, right? Ownership, like property, land, and time. Who were the first people Jesus called? Peter and Andrew, those brothers were business owners. So that's New Testament, right? So ownership of property, of land, of your own time is valuable to Jesus, because the first people he chose were businessmen. We need to be business-like in the way we think, both man and woman. It's not just a man thing, it's a kingdom thing. We need to be business-like in the way we think, right? So when you get into captivity, you build, you plant, and eat. So you provide for yourself, provide for your own needs by being industrious. Now, this is not to say everyone's going to necessarily be a business owner, but we need to have that mindset. So we trade, right? We reproduce, we build families, and we also build social networks, right? So when you reproduce and have families, you build influence. This is why Muslims and Hindus always can build any temple and mosque they want to, because when they get to a certain area, they reproduce at a high rate, which gives them power. It gives them a choice in what happens in their community. I wouldn't advocate voting in a national general election because I think they're all rigged and they're already chosen. But in a local election, you can have sway and influence, because when you are the majority, or when you are a significant portion of that society, those who govern that area have to listen to you, and you have to have a seat at the table. Also, when you are building these social networks, when there's a lot of Christians in one area, you now have a client base. So if you go to certain areas like Ealing Road or Southall, there's a load of Asian people, and all of that is a client base for them. They've taken over area, they've dominated it, and they've built social networks, and they all have one common thing: they all serve the same God, right? And they all want to help each other. So to build influence, you need numbers. Also, pray for the city, the peace and the prosperity, right? So it says, and ask and seek for the peace of the city, whither I have caused you to be carried away captives, and pray unto the Lord for it, for in the peace thereof you shall have peace. So if we're in a city, it's in our interest for that city to have peace, right? And because we are in that city, because we are righteous, because we are godly, God will hear our prayers. And we are the priest of that city. It's actually our job to bring light and to be the salt in that area. So when we are in an area, we should seek to be great examples. And our ultimate motivation and goal is for the virtue and the glory of God to be demonstrated through his people. God wants us to be industrious. He wants us to be successful. He wants us to be an example, because he wants those who are not following his way to be jealous. He wants them to look at the lifestyles we live and say, I want to be like that. He wants them to look at our families and see the way we operate. And he wants them to say, I want to be like them. But how many times is it that we look at the Muslim family and the Hindu family and the Chinese family, and these people all are worshiping other gods, and we're like, oh my God, they have such a good setup. That's how we should be. You know, you go to that Golders Green and you see all those Jews and how they move and how they operate. That's how we should be. Because it's not even just the money thing. It's a behavioral thing. We should be so holy and so morally set apart and so blameless and so excellent in every area, not just finance, but in just our way of living, that people should want to be like us. So anywhere where we are, we should be the best families. We should be the most industrious. We should be the most successful. And it's not that everybody's going to have the biggest business or the biggest house or the nicest car. But if you are in that network of believers, what does the Bible talk about? All things common. So if we're following the Acts principle, and I have a lot, the family down the road who are believers, they're not going to want, because we should all be spreading the wealth amongst us, that we have everything we need and all things in common. And when people see that kind of community and that kind of love, they're going to have to want to be believers. And that's why the early church was so successful, because people saw the way they moved and the way they operated in love, and the way that no one was left out and everybody had according to their need. This is why people were selling their houses and land, because they bought into the kingdom idea of all things common. So look at this. Brexit to /.